to call the meeting order. We're going to start with our roll call, and then we'll have the pledge afterwards.
Mr. Goodwin,
Here.
Mrs. Judge, Mrs. Matlack,
Here.
Mrs. Seidel,
Here.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Here.
Mrs. Schultz,
Here.
Mr. Tomlinson,
Here.
Dr. Wong,
Here.
Dr. Dickinson.
Now let's rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to start off also with a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve minutes? Mrs. Matlack? Do we have a second? Mrs. Scarpolino? Mrs. Sugars?
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
I have to abstain from the regular action meeting dated May 22nd and the executive session dated May 22nd. Yes to the rest.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson,
Yes.
Dr. Wong.
I abstain from the meetings that I was absent.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any correspondence? Any correspondence at this point? Okay. If not, we'll go to our student reps, and we'll have Sonia. I guess we're both reps are from West today, so we'll have Sonia speak.
Just nod and agree. Good evening, everybody. I just have a few announcements to make. Okay. Gotcha. All right, so a few announcements, some from the athletics department. I would like to wish another congratulations to incoming 9th grader Aiden Peters, who has been named a 2018 Maverick National Lacrosse All-Star and selected to attend the Maverick National Lacrosse Academy. Way to make your mark in the West Athletic Department and beyond. And just a reminder to all West and East athletes who plan to participate in fall sports, they should make sure to register online by Wednesday, August 1st. And here's to an awesome 2018-2019 season for the West Lions and the East Cougars. In performing arts news, the West Theater Department has cast their fall musical, which will be Disney's Newsies. The story follows a group of 19th century paper boys living in New York City who choose to stand up for their rights when their employers make it harder for them to make a living off of their work. The show is loosely based on an actual historical event known as the Newsboys' Strike of 1899. Newsies will go up in late October 2018. The rest of the 2018-2019 West Theater season will also feature a fall play titled Almost Maine and a spring musical titled Chicago. And at the Curtain Call Performing Arts Center, 4 West Thespians will be featured in a production of A Chorus Line, a timeless story that explores the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of Broadway hopefuls and veterans from a diverse array of backgrounds. This production has been double casted, and all performances will take place at T.E. Harrington Middle School in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. In the tap cast, senior Charlotte Clements will star as Judy, and senior Jenna Hawkins will star as BB. The tap cast will be performing on August 8th at 2 p.m., August 9th at 7 p.m., and August 11th at 7 p.m. In the jazz cast, sophomore Giselle Dickinson will star as Judy, and I, Sonia Kangaju, will be starring as Val. The jazz cast will be performing on August 8th at 7 p.m., August 10th at 7 p.m., and August 11th at 2 p.m. Thank you.
And now we'll have Greg Robinson from East.
Good evening, esteemed members of the Board of Education. My name is Craig Robinson, the alternate Board of Education representative for Cherry Hill High School East. I have a brief update concerning the school events to share with you guys. So on June 23rd, the class of 1998, their 20-year anniversary, or reunion rather, took place. An additional reunion for the class of 1978 is being planned for September 22nd at Aledo Caterers. From June 25th to June 29th, the roof of the auditorium of our school, Cherry Hill High School East, was repaired in order to further prevent water from entering the building when it rains. From June 27th to June 17th, 18 students from High School East took part in an exchange with Gymnasium Puchheim, a school in the small town of Puchheim in Germany. This particular exchange takes place every 2 years, and the purpose of this trip was to allow students to immerse themselves completely in the German language by speaking it at their respective exchange partners' homes. And in September, the participating students from Cherry Hill High School East hosted their exchange partners from Germany, and nearly 10 months later, the students from Germany hosted the students from Cherry Hill. Prior to their arrival in Puchheim, the students of Cherry Hill East traveled to Iceland and Berlin, in addition to traveling to Salzburg, Austria. After spending 13 days with their respective exchange partners, as well as attending public school in Germany, the 18 students from High School East arrived back on July 17th. Throughout the month of July, cheerleading and lacrosse camps were open to eligible participants, in addition to a multitude of sports clinics, including basketball and volleyball clinics. Currently, registration for all fall sports is open. From July 16th to July 19th, former and current Cherry Hill East lacrosse players hosted a lacrosse camp for participants from kindergarten to 9th grade. The Cherry Hill East lacrosse camps took place on the turf field behind High School East. On July 16th and July 18th, the Cherry Hill East Guidance Department hosted a common application workshop session in the library annex. During these sessions, students and parents learned about college application process, in addition to learning how to fill out their respective common applications. Additional college application workshops are scheduled for later dates in the summer. That concludes the Cherry Hill High School East event update. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Sonia, for your comments. I appreciate that. At this point in time, we are going to open the floor for public comments on any items on the agenda, only on agenda items. You can, if you'd like to speak, please identify the agenda item you're speaking about. Speak into the microphone clearly, state your name and address. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer light will be green at the beginning of the 3 minutes. When the timer turns yellow, there are 30 seconds left to speak. When the timer turns red, your time is up. Please conclude your comments. Are there any public comments at this point on any of the agenda items?
Ann Einhorn, 1017 Edgemore Road. Under Business and Facilities, your resolution from the Board of Ed to the State of New Jersey. Have we any new news from the State of New Jersey with the prior application?
Dr. Malash will talk about that in a moment, but answer no.
Would that be the second part,
Well,
Dr.
I
Malash?
shouldn't say that.
Okay, because that's a very interesting resolution, because we don't know where we stand with the state thus far, and we're running out of time. Thank you.
Good evening. David Rossi, 102 Roanoke Road. Under Business and Facilities, I don't see a specific action item listed on there, but on bullet point number 3, enhanced communication with outreach and I don't have my glasses on, to internal and external shareholders. You'll see it as the third bullet point on page number 10. Yes, that's a goal. Is it okay to still speak on that at this point, or shall I hold tight?
We're looking for specific action items.
Okay. All right.
But,
All right, hold
there
tight.
will be time at the end.
No, okay. All right.
Okay. Anyone else on any action items? If not, then I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Malash for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Oh, wow, that was really loud last time too, right? I'll sit farther back.
like the sound of my own voice, just not that much. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. So, middle of July, I'm very excited because as we sit here, it's July the 24th. We are only about 6 weeks out from school starting. So the first day of school for staff is Tuesday, September the 4th. It's the day after Labor Day. And students return on Wednesday, September 5th. So we're getting very close to the opening of the academic year. As busy as it is in the school district during the course of the summer, and there's a lot of stuff that takes place for us during the summer. It's a lot, with the cleaning of the buildings, the physical structure, and all the work that goes on. And if you're out and about in the district, please make sure when you see the custodians, the buildings and grounds crews, that you thank them for the work that they do, because they do an incredible amount of work in a short amount of time. It's also a lot of time for us to do a great deal of planning about what's going to take place from when the children return until the children finish school late in June. But I always hit this point in the summer and I'm ready for the kids to be back in school. The 19 schools that we have in the building are big facilities, and again, as busy as they are right now with lots of activities, they need children in them, right? They need the students, and I'm ready for the kids to be back. So enjoy the remainder of the summer. Make sure, kids, that you're doing your summer readings. Again, there are summer readings that are posted. They're easily accessible on the website. We've gotten great feedback from students over the last couple of years to help us modify what the summer reading actually looks like. So please make sure you complete your summer reading. As the two student reps reported, and I'm grateful for their reports with us this evening, there have been busy activities going on at the schools, especially at the high schools that are district sponsored. There's been activities to prepare for the Common Application. We have upcoming SAT classes, college essay prep, as well as other activities that have gone on. The summer art and summer music programs are currently going on as well. We have ESY going on in a number of our schools for varied populations in the district. So while those kids are there, I'm ready for the other kids to be back in school. Mrs. Einhorn, in her comments, asked about the resolution that establishes October 2nd as the date for our referendum. And we are still planning on having a referendum on October 2nd. We are dealing with some challenges right now with the Department of Ed. We submitted our applications on April the 4th. By statute, the department has 90 days by which to review those, which placed, as we talked about earlier in the month, and at the end of June, July 4th is that cutoff date. By statute also, they can request or they can notify us of a 60-day extension, which they did not do. So we've been going through Mrs. Sugars, myself, Mr. Middleton, Mr. Green, working with the folks, trying to work with the folks at the state to answer some questions that have come up over the course of the last 10 days. Tomorrow afternoon at 2:30, Mrs. Sugars and I and Mr. Middleton will go up to the Department of Ed and meet with some of the folks in the Facilities Department to try and finalize answers to any of the questions that they have about the information that was submitted on April the 4th. I contacted the commissioner yesterday. I had the opportunity, as I talked about last month, to meet with the commissioner in May with a number of the members of the Fair Funding Committee from the township, as well as the mayor and Senator Beach. So we have an established relationship. So I contacted him, and he did follow up pretty expeditiously yesterday. So we're hoping to get final answer from the state about our questions for the referendum. I would love to be going into a lot more detail with the board and with the community about what is contained within those. We cannot do that until we get the final approval from the state. So that's why we have the October 2nd date still set, because we do want to establish that as the date for the election. Assuming things go well, on the August 14th board meeting is when we will adopt the resolution questions and submit them to the state on August the 15th. So there'll continue to be additional discussion. We'll have discussion on August 7th at the Strategic Planning Committee, again, and then discussion at August 14th where we'll look to take action on what the questions are. As that information is available, as soon as it's available, continue pushing it out and getting it out to all of you. There's still a great deal of information that can be found on our website about what the questions have been and what the discussion has been, and we encourage people to continue to follow up. If folks have specific questions about where we are and what's going on, I always encourage you to contact us. Either use the quick question button, you can contact me directly, either via phone or via email. You can contact Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Wilson and I will be at Cherry Bowl on Saturday. We will have a table set up where we'll talk in generalities about the referendum. We'll have voter registration documentation. We'll have some of the information about our Cherry Hill Fair Funding group that's out there. So we're looking forward to seeing a lot of folks from the community at Covered Bridge, right? At Covered Bridge Swim Club on Saturday for Cherry Bowl. If you have not seen Cherry Bowl in the past, an incredibly exciting time for the community to get together. So we'll be out there talking about what's going on. Each week, Mrs. Wilson and I have been working on a quick minute, just a quick video presentation we'll be posting on social media and through our YouTube channel with the district, just as a way to try to get out information as quickly as we can, and again, in a manner that's kind of user-friendly with where it is. So we will have an additional posting. I will do an update tomorrow after we return from the state. So ideally, that'll be on sometime 5:30ish or so with where we are. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. Now we're going to move into our action agenda, and I'm going to start with asking Mrs. Seidel to move the C&I agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of out-of-district student placements for 2017-2018 school year. Number 2, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2018-2019 school year. Number 3, approval of out-of-district student placements for the 2018-2019 school year. And number 4, approval of services contract with New Jersey Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired for the 2018-2019 school year. Do I have a second? Ms. Scarpellino. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes to all.
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpellino,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson,
I need to abstain from student placements at Bancroft NeuroHealth, but yes to the remainder.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Seidel. And now I will move the BNF agenda. The superintendent recommends that I move the following: 1, financial reports; 2, resolution for award of bids; 3, resolution for the award of transportation; 4, resolution for the award of change orders; 5, resolution of the Board of Education of the Township of Cherry Hill in the County of Camden, New Jersey, authorizing certain actions in connection with a proposed bond referendum. Okay. 6, resolution modifying the 2018-2019 general fund budget for additional state aid. And 7, acceptance of non-public grant funds for the 2018-2019 school year. Do I have a second? Mrs. Matlack. Any questions? If not, Mrs. Sugars.
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpellino,
Yes to all.
Mrs. Schultz,
I need to abstain from Bayada Home Health on the bill list. Yes to the rest.
Mr. Tomlinson,
Abstaining from Bancroft NeuroHealth on the bill list, yes to the remainder.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
And now, Dr. Malash would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. I just want to point out and thank the board on page 15 under item number 6. So this identifies where we'll be allocating the additional funds that we received from the department and from the state once the budget was adopted. Again, as we had discussed at the end of June and then in July at the Committee of the Whole. In total, we received a little more than about $3.1 million in additional state funding for the 2018-2019 academic year when compared to 2017-2018. Now, $596,000 or so of that money was announced to us when the original budget allocations were put forward this winter, and then when the final budget was adopted, additional a little more than $2.5 million. And as you can see on page 15 in the agenda under item number 6, the allocation of those funds, $1 million towards instructional technology, about $200,000 for athletic field projects, camera systems, swipe card access at the high schools, about $750,000, technology for infrastructure, another $100,000, kindergarten supplies and furniture for our new full-day kindergarten program, about $75,000, as well as other capital projects, a little more than $440,000 that's there. So that's, again, just a clarification of where those monies are. And just a reminder, because the question has come up in the past, the non-public grant funds that come through, we see about non-public textbooks and all that kind of thing, that is pass-through money that comes from the Department of Ed. We do not have any control over how much money goes to each of these schools. It is our responsibility to accept the money and then to allocate the money to those schools. We are responsible to oversee the expenditure of those funds, and that goes through the Curriculum Instruction Office. It's one of the many responsibilities that Dr. Mahan assumes.
Okay, thank you. And now for human resources, I would like to ask Mr. Tomlinson to move the human resources agenda.
Okay. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, leave of absence certificated. Number 6, leave of absence non-certificated. Number 7, other compensation certificated. Number 8, other compensation non-certificated. Number 9, other motions. And we have a pink sheet with a number 10, assignment salary change certificated, and number 11, assignment salary change non-certificated. Are there any questions? Oh, is there a second? Can I have Mrs. Scarpolino? Any questions? All right, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars?
Mr. Tomlinson,
Yes to all.
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes to all.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes to all.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Tomlinson. And now I'd like to ask Mrs. Scarpolino to move the policy and legislation agenda items.
Certainly, Mr. Goodwin. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, first reading of policies. Number 2, second reading of policies and regulations. Number 3, approval of New Jersey Principal Evaluation for Professional Learning Observation Instrument. Do I have a second? Mrs. Matlack, are there any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson,
Yes to all.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Scarpolino. And now I'd like to ask Mrs. Matlack to move the strategic planning agenda items.
Thank you very much. Superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, Cherry Hill Public Schools mission statement and board goals for the 2018-2019 school year. Do I have a second? Mrs. Scarpolino, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Scarpolino,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tomlinson,
Yes.
Dr. Wong.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. And now we are going to have our second public discussion. And for the second public discussion, you can comment on any item. If you would like to speak, please speak into the microphone clearly, your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer light will be green at the beginning of the 3 minutes. When the timer turns yellow, there are 30 seconds left to speak. When the timer turns red, your time is up. Please conclude your comments. Are there any public discussion items?
Good evening again. David Rossi still, 102 Roanoke Road. I still don't have my glasses. One of the goals under B for business and facilities is enhanced communication with and outreach to internal and external stakeholders. That's fantastic. It's a great goal. I think that's what we are all here for, and I know a lot of community members who cannot make it on a regular basis look for ways to have that. And as far as providing us information, for those who cannot, you have many avenues that do that. You post the the meetings are done live. They're also, I think, accessible in an archive. So there are a number of ways we can receive that information, which is fantastic. But we have, so I have some questions on that as it regards to community dialogue. So community dialogue has shifted over the last several years to online platforms. And as my friend and neighbor has mentioned before, Ben, regarding social media, you know, it can be a place where people are riled up and use it for ways that they wouldn't normally when they have a conversation face to face. And that is, you know, indicative of where we are as a society. It's part of how communication has evolved. But it's also there for people who can't come regularly. So there are platforms where people want to share ideas, where people want to get information from folks like us who are here regularly and do a lot of things to provide information. And when we struggle to get some information in different forums, obviously this is a one-way forum based upon the format. We know that. So are the committee meetings and whatnot. You know, there's been some coffee and conversations which are very good. But people can't always make those. So there are a lot of people who want and really need this information and are begging for it. We try to do that in certain platforms. And what we're really looking for from the board is, you know, accountability, collaboration, and transparency. As we sit here today, we still do not have the bond approved, the proposed bond approved from the state. And there's many questions. We've just found out that there's questions. What are those questions? We have a lot of questions. What are the specific questions that the state has? Are they similar questions that we have? Are they about long-range facility plans? Are they about, you know, some of the things that we may have brought up? Will we get those? We'll submit a question and we'll see. But we would like to know what they are as well. Thank you.
Rick Short, 1002 Chelton Parkway. There's two things I'll say before I get started on the two most important things I'm going to say. First thing I'm going to say is we often hear Dr. Malash say that at the end of the night, we all turn the lights off and we all live in the same town. So when I speak, I will remember this. Dr. Malash has also said, if you don't want this answer, you want kids want hurt. There's an in-between when we have these discussions. There's an in-between when we are going and where we are going. And this is in reference to school security. Ladies and gentlemen, there are two things I'm going to say. I'm going to tell you the greatest moment I've ever had in this school in the last 9 years. The greatest moment was at a graduation when I sat there and I heard I heard a student speak, and the student was speaking about teachers. And I looked over to the teachers, and the teachers were crying. So that is your education at work. You guys do an excellent job for that. The worst moment was when I sat right there on April 24th, 2018 at 8:05, when I heard a person in this room say that bulletproof glass does not shatter. Correction. That we can't use bulletproof glass because it shatters. I have bulletproof glass right in front of me. I think I might have been the only person in the room that knew this person was wrong. And what it led me down is a road that's horrible. Why I say it's horrible is I've discovered that all the vestibules that have been built now, the first three, do not have any protection. They can be broken through in absolutely 2 seconds. I also know that Pensauken's bond just approved. and they have bulletproof protection. I also know, and I've done extensive research in Washington Township. Washington Township's rated number 3 in the state. So I know exactly what Washington Township's done. I've studied them for months. So, your entire security program won't work, flat out. It's not the best. And I think people behind me, I know, want the best. And your current leaving them unprotected with 19 schools with no 3M film shows a total disregard of knowledge. You had absolutely no consultant at the time. We know that. There was another major mistake made on that night, 4/24, and you just covered it up today with $750,000 in cameras. I thank you for that. But it could have all been fixed before 9/5. Thank you.
Deja vu's got to go, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Ann Einhorn, 1017 Edgemore Road. I would like to talk about the bond. I was one very active participant in the prior bond. Our whole community worked together because at that time our slogan was Save Our Schools. At this point in time, from what I see on social media, first I thought maybe some people wanted to salvage our schools, but at this point I feel like there's such negativity about the bond that the new slogan is probably Stop Our Schools. I'm sorry about this. We desperately need to fix buildings. We do not have the money, all right? So my concern is the sooner we know about the state, the better, Dr. Malash. Secondly, this issue of lack of accountability, not responsive. You know, I sat on the board for a long time. We heard it all the time. And in this day and age, quite frankly, Dr. Malash, you've done an outstanding job, particularly with the bond, of getting out there. I have never seen a superintendent work so hard in my life. That's important for the community. And I also know that you're actively engaged in protecting and taking care of our kids as well as the board and all your staff. I am tired of the negativity. And what worries me is that it's going to be the eroding of opportunities for all of our kids to be successful if it continues. There is a big picture here. I understand the anger. I was there for 7 years before I got on the board. And then when I got on the other side of the table, I realized how slowly the rules of education move. So I would caution some to just ask your questions. But I really sincerely doubt that it's going to be done on social media form, because even today I was somewhat insulted by something that I read. And I had that problem with email years ago. It's very easy to interpret words in my head. I'll just use my head. I also know, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Green, school boards really necessarily do not have to have these public forums, right, for business, or has that rule or law changed? Yes. Okay, because many years ago there was it was a much different ball game. So we're very fortunate to live in this time that we can come to this mic and ask our questions. I would encourage every community member to ask the questions. You know, I've been on your website. I've gotten the answers. Doesn't mean I have to share it, but it's the question that I want to answer, and I want to answer correctly. I sincerely hope at some point in time, in the next year or two, that some of the volatile remarks and things that have been made subside a bit, because I do believe that we are doing the best we can for the kids of Cherry Hill. So I thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Well, if there's no other comments, going once, twice, I'm going to have a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Matlack and Mrs. Seidel. Thank you, everyone, for coming out.